Computer will do that. And then it's starting. Okay. So, India, do you want to talk, introduce yourself first? Do you want me to go right to your presentation?
Go ahead and go to the first slide.
Okay.
So when I fumble, I can cover it by telling you to click.
Okay. So India sent me some stuff, so I'm going to share that on the screen. She did say if you had any questions during the, as we're going through this, that you could ask her. She didn't have any problems with being interrupted. I'm just going to see, let me see if I can, yeah, okay. Let's see if I can get the participant list up so that I could see who all was on in case anybody else joins.
So should we all turn our microphones off unless we want to talk?
That might be better so we don't get any background noise.
Just click mute, is that what I do?
Yep, just the little microphone looking thing. If you touch that, it'll turn red with a line through it, or get a line through it and you'll be muted. So
I guess I should say got it and then say.
Say that before you mute yourself.
That's right. Okay, here I go. Got it.
Okay, India, here's your first slide.
All righty. I'm India Hayford, and I joined EGA in October of 1987. And I can say that that was a life-changing moment for me. I'm not a real sociable person and live in an area that's fairly isolated, 1,400 miles from family, almost far enough. And I needed something to do. And I saw in the paper one time that there was this group of embroiderers. So I went to the meeting and I thought I had to audition because it was EGA. So I took a couple of pieces to show people to see if they would accept me into the group. And they did. They're lovely people. We're a small group up in Casper, Wyoming. I think right now there are 14 or 15 of us. When I first joined, there were 45, but we were at the height of a boom at that time. And I figured, since this might be the only time in my life I can have any kind of retrospective, we are starting from the beginning. Trudy, would you click?
I would love to click. Yep.
This is my first piece, guys. When I was 4, my grandmother Collins, her name was Jessie Collins, she did every kind of needlework you can possibly imagine, and she did it all well. And when I was 4, I was interested in what she was doing. So she drew that plum down there in the bottom and showed me how to embroider. Her nice, neat embroidery is on the left side or on the right side. And my first stitches as a kid are on the left. And eventually she helped me do the little bird up on top. So there you are, 61 years of being an embroiderer. Click. I started out doing kits for the most part, and those Martha Pullen iron-on embroideries like everybody's done. And in the late 70s, I started doing interpretations and adaptations. The picture on the far left was a line drawing done by a Wyoming artist named Mike Priva. I knew Mikey, he and my husband were friends, and they spent all their time crawling around many, many feet underground in caves. And he had drawn this picture, this line drawing, for a caving magazine. And you see the little guy sitting on top of the rock with his rope draped over his shoulder and his carbide lantern on his hard hat, wondering where the cave is, and it's right underneath him. And basically, Mikey gave me his line drawing, and I put it on the back of a blue denim work shirt and embroidered this for my husband, but right before we got married. And that was the first time I had ever done anything anywhere near that elaborate. Of course, I gave it to my husband, who is a geologist, and he looked at it and he admired it. And then he informed me that there's no flowstone in caves like that. So I got the flowstone wrong, guys. Click. I started doing some adaptations. This is a adaptation from a Scamander, I think is how you say it. It's a company that produces upholstery fabric, really super high-end upholstery fabric. And in one of the Architectural Digest magazines, I saw one of their pieces that featured this bird in different colors. And I took the outline of the bird and perched him up on a branch and added tail feathers to him. So this was moving on into adaptations of stuff. I couldn't, he originally just on that one vine, and I couldn't decide what to do. And my daughter, who was about 10 at the time, found my tracing of the bird, and she started adding branches behind it. And it looked really cool. So I added one of the branches and a few more flowers, and this was the result. Click. Hi, Lisa. Okay, this is the first piece that was actually original design. I started it the first night that I went to the Needle Guild meeting. I needed something to work on. I was in between projects, and I had a number of pen and ink drawings that I had done. So I grabbed one and I did the outline of this, the outline of the body and the face. And I took it to Needle Guild with me that night and started working on it. And at the time we were wanting children. We didn't think we were going to be able to have them. I lost 2 babies right in a row, and I was feeling pretty bad about it. And this was my way of working through it. This is Madonna without child. It's done on linen with Marlette rayon thread. And if you have never used Marlette rayon thread, let me save you a lot of grief. Don't do it. It was one of the most frustrating materials I've ever worked with. The dyes and some of it caused the thread to shred. But this was my first blue Madonna. This is Madonna without child. Click. This is Madonna with child. We managed to have my son. He's 31 years old now. And if you look down there at the bottom, you can see a little face peeking out of the swaddling. When I started this blue Madonna, one of the women at Needle Guild looked at it and said, "Are you crazy?" Because I had complained so much about the Marlette. Well, this is good old DMC 6-strand floss on this one, and it went a lot easier. Click. I had a whole series of Madonnas planned. Some of them I did, some of them I didn't. But after those first 2 Madonnas, one of the ladies in Guild came up to me and said, "You need to do one more blue Madonna of a Madonna in rags and call it Madonna with child in college." I never got that one done, but after my children got older, I thought I should do another blue Madonna in the style of the Scream, you know, the Norwegian thing where the guy has his hands on his face and he's got his mouth open in this Scream. And I was going to call that Madonna with teenage children, but I never got that one done either. This is one of the pen and ink drawings that I did, and it's another one that someday I'd like to do in embroidery, but I haven't yet. Click. Okay. I saw a line drawing done by Picasso of a mother and child, and it really appealed to my imagination. And I thought I was getting a little tired of Madonnas. So when my son was born, I did this one of my my husband and my son, and it was inspired by that line drawing that Picasso did. This was the first thing approaching any kind of realism and skin tones that I did. There was a lot of experimentation on it. His hair, my husband's hair, is French knots, and this is done in flower thread on linen. No, I take that back, on really fine wool. It's not linen, it's this real fine wool. And I look at that one, and to this day, I'm pretty satisfied with that. There's the detail of it over on the right side. Click. Okay, and having done my father and my son, I then had a little girl, and I decided I needed to do one more Madonna of my daughter and I. I have very long hair. It was much blonder then than it is now. This is also done in flower thread, and it's on a very nubby linen that's got a lot of, what do you call them? Burls in it. You know, the little bits of trash and stuff. And I left them in, and I really like the effect. The hair on the woman is only attached up at the top, and then everything else is very lightly tacked down so you can't see it, down to the base of her head. And then everything else falls pretty loose. The thing actually trails off the picture and out of the frame. Click. The only problem with everybody muted is I'm sitting here going, God, are they bored to tears? I don't hear anybody. This was another one that I tried. This is flower thread again. I did a whole lot in flower thread there for a while. I liked the texture. I liked the sheen that it had without it actually being shiny. I discovered that it takes a lot of thread to cover that much hair. This is all actually stitched down. I use a lot of stem stitch and outline stitch when I did these things. I find that it flows well. I find that it's easy to blend. It's easy to change directions with. If I want some texture, I just change from outline stitch to stem stitch so that it looks a little bit rougher. And yes, there is a difference between outline stitch and stem stitch. When I did my EGA teacher certification, Shirley K. Wolfersberger was the person who sat in the room with me to evaluate me. I actually went down to her house in Albuquerque, and she didn't believe there was any difference between outline stitch and stem stitch. She thought that one was just the other one turned over. But when she started doing her piece, she couldn't understand why the outline of her fire god was smooth and everybody else's was rough. And I said, it's because you used the wrong stitch. And showed her, made a line of stem stitch, turned it upside down and made another line of stem stitch, and then did the same as outline. And that was one of my finest moments, because Shirley Kay knows more about embroidery than just about anybody I know. And to be able to pull it off and her go, I learned something. I just felt like I won a little medal that day. But I do use those two stitches a lot. There's also some bullion stitch. There's a lot of French knots in that. I'm particularly fond of French knots. Okay, I should mention, I do almost all surface stitch, different techniques. Most of what I do is freehand. On ones like this, I drew her face and the outline of her head, and that's all, and then built it up from there. I like embroidery as a medium because you're working slowly enough that you can usually see your mistakes developing and take them out, or just go on faith that things are going to work out. The joke in Casper Needle Guild is India can't count. And Lisa's on there. She's sitting there clapping right now. And it's her fault. She started telling everybody that I can't count. Well, I can count. I can count as high as 10. I just don't like to. So mostly what I do, mostly what you're going to see is surface stitchery. Click. This was kind of a different piece for me. On my mom and dad's first date, my mother was 15 and I think he was 19 at the time. And they had a camera. And this was the picture of her that he took right before their first date. She's sitting on the stoop of this big old 2-story white Southern house in Hope, Arkansas. And her name was Joy. So this is Joy in the garden at Hope. And it was a really challenging piece to try to get the steps in there. I learned a lot from doing this piece. I look at it now and there's some things that I would change. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied about it. This is pearl cotton for the most part. The steps and the column there, that brick column, are done with pearl cotton. And then there's some detailing done with floss. Click. And when I turned 40, I decided I needed a self-portrait. And I took a completely different direction on this. This is a combination of applique and embroidery and beadwork. On that white band, there's all sorts of sequins and beads. The circles on the white band are chichadour, those are mirrors. The little decals, the arrowhead in there represents my son. He is a hunter. He started out bow hunting as soon as they'd let him out in the field. The rose down in the bottom is my daughter, Carolina Rose. And there's a cat dangling off of there for all the kitty cats I've had over the years. And the thing that cracks me up now, I was 40 when this was done. And you can't see all the amethyst in the collar down there, but there's 40 pieces of amethyst in that collar. They catch the light and glint when you see it in person. But here I am, I'm 40. I was afraid my chin was beginning to sag. So you notice I've got my head lifted up. Well, ladies, I'm 65 now, and I realize that when you're 40, you are not old and your chin is not sagging. Click. This is actually a detail off of a larger piece. I suppose it's about 1 foot wide by 18 inches long. Sue, is it Sue Goodman? That doesn't sound right.
Who does the, she used to do the pictures and then you'd embellish on the pictures?
Yeah, Susan Goodman.
Uh-huh.
I took a class from her in Boise, over 25 years ago. And it was a white on white class. And I had a photograph of a cave called Virgin Cave. That's actually a cave in the Guadalupe Mountains in New Mexico. And started from the center with that piece of shell, that piece of cut shell you see up there, just slightly left of top center. And I built up from there. There's a lot of padding under there that you don't see. It's very three-dimensional. When it was originally done, the change in relief was about 4.5 or 5 inches from the lowest point to the highest point. And there's embroidery, there's collage, I don't know how many different kinds of fabric in it. There's fabric and lace from my wedding dress. And it was called Virgin Cave. Well, when my husband looked at it, he looked at that funky little piece of shell. And I hope none of you ladies are easily shocked, but he looked at it and said, "My, that's vaginal." And I got to thinking, well, there's my wedding dress on it and it's Virgin Cave, and it kind of built up into something that I wasn't expecting. But this was a real departure from me, from that applique to something this textural. And when I was working on it, Susan kept saying, "Less is more, less is more." And I'm yelling, "Go for Baroque," and throwing more stuff on. Okay, click. This was another piece along those same lines. Bottom left-hand corner, it's called Crazy Woman Creek Winter. There's a creek up north of us called Crazy Woman Creek. And if you look at the detail, you'll see that there's lace and there's pearls and there's French stitch and there's all different sorts of fabric manipulation. The water is netting over canvas with the embroidery on the top of it. I had to use a thimble and pliers on this to get through that canvas, but it hasn't distorted in all the years of hanging up. And this is another one where I got to the edge of the lower canvas and just left the threads hanging. So when it hangs on the wall and there's a wind in the house, the water actually moves. And I've done a couple of waterfall pictures this way. Click. The other thing I should mention about that last picture about Crazy Woman, I did a lot of that sitting in the hospital with my dad during his last illness. So it has a lot of meaning for me, sitting on the 5th floor of the hospital in Texarkana with him. Not saying anything, just being there. Okay, go ahead. Excuse me, I live in a very dry climate. Okay, I did this. It was actually on display in one of the first prospectors exhibits in Boise, back about 1992. And this is just a garden. I called it Irish garden. I don't know that it's Irish, but it is a garden. And it's another one that's got a lot of relief. The lowest part of the embroidery, if you look there slightly to the lower right of center, you can actually see the canvas peeking through. That's the only place on the piece that you can see the canvas, because I think I threw every piece of thread I owned at this. Hello, hello.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Accidentally touched something.
That's okay. There is everything in here. There is watercolor, there is wool, there is linen thread. Those tall peaky flowers in the bottom are linen thread. There's some spring thread. If you look there in the extreme lower right-hand corner, those are bullion roses made out of spring. Everything from single strand DMC to fairly heavy pearl cotton is in this piece. From the lowest part of the piece, the canvas layer, to the highest part, which is probably those flowers along the bottom, is probably, it's at least 1/4 of an inch. It may be close to 1/2 an inch. So there's a lot of relief in this. The sky up at the top, I am particularly proud of that sky. It took me 2 weeks to do the sky. It's single strand DMC floss in probably 12 or 15 different colors. And I did that in North Dakota. That was about the best I could do. And French knots, there are about a bajillion French knots in here. I can make, you want to know how to do French knots? You call me, we'll do French knots. So this was definitely my period of going for Baroque. Click. And after some of that, I needed something to cleanse my palette. This one right here is called Even the Garden of the Serpent of Wisdom. The Gnostic Christians believe that the serpent was a good guy because the serpent brought knowledge to mankind, kind of their version of Prometheus bringing fire. The serpent brought wisdom. I wanted to keep this. This is framed in a silver bamboo frame. The color on it is actually a much deeper green. I never could get a good picture of it because that is satin. It's actually fabric left over from the very first skirt I made for belly dancing. I was a belly dancer, a belly dance teacher for 39 years. And I use a lot of scraps from my costumes. The heron pants on the woman up there at the top center, that is Rachel. It's a nylon tube that stretches and distorts, and it's not quite opaque, so that you can see these different layers of it. And it was the perfect material for what I was looking for. My serpent of wisdom, folks, I'm from Wyoming and I grew up in Texas. That's a rattlesnake. I don't know what was in the Garden of Eden, but in my part of the world, we have rattlesnakes for the serpent of wisdom. And that was a very difficult piece for me, because when it comes to embroidery, I am not by nature a minimalist at all. Click. And I'm still being minimalist here. This is the sunrise over Stonehenge. You can kind of see the outline of Stonehenge in the bottom. This is on a piece of linen polyester blend fabric that was one of the best materials I've ever embroidered on, actually. It was flexible, but it kept its shape. The sun itself is applique. There's several different colors. And then the little red dots are all teeny tiny little single strand French knots. And then there's beading across the top. Okay, click. And this was sort of the ultimate simplicity. I saw this little statue. It's a clay statue of a kneeling warrior from somewhere in Asia. And I drew the picture of it. And this is done in linen thread on a gold linen background. It was interesting. I didn't actually count that, but it was fun to come up with all of those little boxes so that they looked like they had stretched out at the bottom and then stayed tighter up further on his robe. And then up in the corner, there is a Chinese coin that somebody gave me that I put on there. This was actually a challenging piece just because of the nature of the linen thread. I find linen thread difficult to work with. It's stiff. I don't have quite the control over it that I do cotton. It wants to do its own thing. And I found that it just took some forcing to convince it to do what I wanted to. I found that if I took the thread, if anybody wants to work with linen, I found if I took the thread and I held it taut and I ran it back and forth across the edge of a table to kind of break it down a little more and soften it up, that made it a little bit easier to work with. Click, click.
Sorry.
Okay. I started getting a little less minimalist as I was going along. This was a picture of a dancer that I knew. She's a tribal dancer, which is a modern American form that descended from the original belly dance. And the veil that she's flinging around her head is a variegated silk that's rough, very rough silk, beading around the edges. And her body is DMC floss. The sleeves, the bodice of her vest is that same silk that's in her veil, but her skirt is layers and layers and layers of couched pearl cotton and Karen's watercolor thread, and then gold work on her belt. That was actually a lot of fun to do. I look at it now. Her hair is French knots. I think I mentioned the French knots. Anybody want to learn to do French knots? I have no idea how many hundreds of French knots are in that mass of hair. it's one of those pieces that I look at and I see things I wish I'd done differently, but it is what it is, and I probably won't do another one. And the ground on this is actually a piece of polyester. It wasn't all that pleasant to embroider on. I don't like the feel of polyester, but I love that textured background, and it was just what I wanted for this piece. And the mat on it, that purple mat, that's another belly dance costume. Okay. I don't know what people that don't belly dance do for mats on their frames. Go ahead and click. I actually did a lot of costuming. I started dancing in 1978, and I performed professionally for a couple of years, Laramie and Northern Colorado area. I was what they called semi-professional because I didn't make my living at it, but it paid for the groceries more than once. I didn't have a lot of money. I needed the money I made from dancing and from tips to pay my bills. So I made a lot of my own costumes. And this is actually the first costume that I ever made. It's a gold broad, had a matching hip band to it. I cannot believe I was ever that small. And it amused me to no end to discover it takes exactly 1 gross of coins to cover the lower half of a D-cup bra, just in case you ever want to cover your bra. The coins are suspended. I use diddle floss to sew them on there. And they're suspended from 2 glass beads each so that they actually move when you move. Click. Lisa Esterline, who's actually down there in the corner of where I can see, was one of my dance students for several years. And I retired from teaching 3 years ago after 39 years of dancing. And arthritis finally closed me down. But one of the good things about it, I will never have to buy any kind of fancy ground, gold thread, or beads ever again as long as I live. Belly dancing kind of led me into a form of embroidery that I dearly love. For 2,000 years, there were Jews in Yemen. There was a community of Jews in Yemen. The legend was that they moved there after the Queen of Sheba met Solomon, and they went back with her to establish trade between Solomon's Israel and the land of Yemen. And they developed a very distinctive form of embroidery. There was a lot of religious symbolism to it. You could at one time tell where a woman was from by the design of embroidery on her clothing. When they essentially transferred the entire population, Jewish population of Yemen, to Israel in 1948 to 1949. They finally got the last of them out just a few years ago. And when they moved to Israel, the Israelis were trying to build a new country out of 100 different nationalities. And they really embraced the embroidery that came from the area around Saba. But the asymmetry, the Yemenite Jews weren't worried about symmetry. They just sat down and embroidered. There was no pattern. There was no planning it out. They just sat down and they did it the way that it pleased them. In Israel, there were a lot of European Jews. They liked symmetry. They wanted everything perfect. Moshe Dayan's wife started a house of fashion there. She hired a lot of these women to do embroidery on her clothing. Esther Zeitz was a Jerusalem dress designer who did the same thing. But they took this original Yemenite embroidery and they standardized it and they made it more symmetrical so that it would appeal to Europeans. Both types are beautiful. when I first came across it, I was actually researching Middle Eastern costumes in search of a costume for a style of dance called ballady, which is a folk dance of the people. And I was having a hard time finding anything that I liked because so much of the Middle East does cross stitch. Well, in my opinion, it is called cross stitch because that is what I feel when I do it, is cross. And I was looking for surface work. And one of the bookstore owners here in Casper, I told her what I was looking for, and she went online and she came up with this 60-page self-published book by a woman named Margalit Adi Rubin. And she had actually written the book for people she was teaching embroidery. It was the first time I had ever come across Yemenite embroidery. I ended up spending $60 for that original 60-page book because it was exactly what I was looking for. And when I started researching it, I couldn't find out anything about it. I've spent a lot of years pursuing this. EGA has been generous enough to give me 3 grants. I've been to Stinson Beach, California, to photograph a collection of embroidery. I went to Los Angeles a few years ago to photograph a second collection. And more recently, they gave me a grant to go to the Sherwin Williams, that's the paint company. Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art in, of all places, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they let me in, they showed me the stuff they had stored in the back. They opened all of their display cases for me and just turned me loose. So EGA contributed to a lot of knowledge and some continuation of an art form that's pretty much gone. People got to Israel, and of course the young people didn't want to do that old-fashioned stuff that grandma and mom did, and they abandoned it. The Israelis took it and turned it into a completely different form, a different adaptation that they call Yemenite or Israeli Yemenite embroidery. I learned to do both. Because embroidery is ephemeral, it disappears fast. And when these people left for Israel in 1948 through 1950, there were a lot of people to get on a very few planes, and they were forced to leave a lot of things behind, including a lot of these elaborately embroidered costumes, and they're lost. Basically, what we have are a few examples and some pictures. And this is a sampler. This is one of my name tags, which is really, it looks more like a sandwich board when I wear it, so I don't wear it very often. But it was a sampler of the different kinds of Yemenite Jewish embroidery. Go ahead and click. This was one of the belts that I did. The Israeli form uses a lot of metallic embroidery. These are spirals. That's one long continuing piece of gold thread, doubled gold thread. It's all couched down. Very nice effect with just a few stitches. Click. Then I got fancier. This is an antari. An antari is just a Middle Eastern dress. It's kind of the basic robe that they wear there. And the embroidery on this is the more traditional form of Yemenite Jewish embroidery. The colors are not quite as traditional. You don't see a lot of purple in that. And this is freehand embroidery. I started out along the neckline, outlining an embroidery, and it just grew from there. It is a wonderful form of embroidery. I do teach it. I have an hour-and-a-half presentation on the history of the people, the history of the embroidery, and a whole lot of pictures of embroidered clothing from the times that I went and photographed collections in California and in Oklahoma. What this is embroidered on is a linen cotton combination of fabric. It was wonderful to work with. The traditional colors that they used in Yemen were black. They were allowed in the cities. The Jews in Yemen kept pretty much to their part of the city. And after Islam came into power in the 7th century, the fortune of the Jews went up and down a lot over the next, 1,500 years, depending on who was in power. But most of the time, they were not allowed to wear colors. There were a few people who, because of their position in government or something they had done, were given permission to wear colored clothing. They generally didn't, to avoid attracting attention. So they wore black and they wore dark blue, but they embellished it with this incredibly beautiful embroidery. My Antari is pretty restrained. Very often you would see it covering most of the garment. Click. In 2016, I sent a proposal to Threads magazine about Yemenite embroidery. I've noticed since then they've had half a dozen different articles on embroidery, so I like to think I started a trend. This piece is another one. They sent me the yellow fabric. When I saw this sulfur yellow fabric, I thought, oh Lord, what on earth am I going to use for colors on it? And I chose a whole bunch of colors, and I got hold of a lady, Ann Hudson, who is a member of our guild. And Ann has such a flair for color. She picked out these threads from this huge collection that I gave her. And one of the colors she came up with was this acid green. And I thought, oh, great, acid green on sulfur yellow. But there was something about that green that just made all the other colors look better. I would never have chosen it. I have to give her credit for that. They sent me the pattern for the tunic. They sent me the flat piece of fabric, and I thread traced the pattern onto the fabric. And then I thread traced just a basic outline. I doubled a piece of paper. I cut it out freehand. I laid it on the top of the bodice, traced around the outside that the top line and the bottom line were the only things that I started out with. And I built it up from there. There's a lot of Japanese gold in this. There's spider web stitch. There's different varieties of chain. There's blanket stitch, chain, just plain chain. I think there's some herringbone in there. All the gold is couched for the most part. And once I finished the piece, I sent it back to Threads magazine, and Nora, who is their seamstress there, turned it into the tunic that Jasmine is wearing in this picture. And they had agreed to pay me a flat rate for the article itself. And when I got the check, I realized they'd paid me an additional several $100s to do the embroidery. So I was kind of proud of this piece. It's there somewhere at Threads now. Click. These are different designs that I've come up with. In teaching the Yemenite Jewish embroidery class that I teach for EGA, it's a lecture series, it's a notebook class, and then there's also a lot of examples, and these are all bracelets that we made. The one in the lower right-hand corner is more traditional. The green and the gold and the red on the black are very traditional colors, and that's a very traditional design to use. You see a lot of that zigzag design with the blanket stitch in the middle, joined in the center. The gold and silver work is more of the Israeli version. You see a lot more of it in Israel than you do other places. The design in the center, that is the pink and white and light blue, is a more traditional kind of design with the herringbone in there. If you look at the gold and purple disc in the bottom, you can kind of see how that is made. It's done on spokes, and then the gold is completely surface work. You can see where the gold thread comes off on the right side. I left that so you could kind of follow it around. It's fun, it's innovative. One of the things I really truly believe as a teacher is that you should never do exactly what the teacher tells you to do. And I will show people these stitches and then I will turn them loose. If I ever have a student who comes into one of my courses and leaves with something that looks exactly like the original piece, I feel like I failed. I want people to change the colors. I want them to change the stitches. I want them to think about it. I want them to suit themselves. I want them to go beyond coming up in one hole and going down in another. And for some people, that's really, really difficult to just take that first step outside of what already exists. And this has been a wonderful way to do it. I can show people 3 or 4 different stitches, and they can take those and turn out something beautiful. They aren't difficult stitches. There's chain, there's couching stitch, there's blanket stitch, and there's just not a whole lot else on here that you're looking at, well, except for the herringbone. The basic embroidery is simple. The way you put them together is what gives you the taste of the Yemenite Jewish traditions and designs. So I love this form of embroidery. I feel absolutely blessed to have stumbled across it. The people I've come across who know what it is, and there's not very many, there's only been a handful. I went to the University of Texas at Austin here about 5 years ago. One of the professors of Middle Eastern studies there had a piece that I saw online, and she collects costumes. I wrote her an email, said, this is who I am. I'm coming to Texas to visit family. Would you be willing to let me see this piece and take a photograph of it? And she said yes. And I went down to meet her, and she was very welcoming, but very formal and a little stiff. And we got to talking about embroidery, and we realized that we both had this passion for this absolutely esoteric, nobody else gives a rip kind of subject, so that she told me she could give me half an hour. An hour later, she threw both arms around me, kissed me on both cheeks, and told me not to lose contact. And this is the kind of connection that I found with people through this type of embroidery. It means the world to me, and I'm so grateful to EGA for giving me the opportunity to travel around and do this. I'm not a rich person. I couldn't have done it without the help. Click. And this is to prove, Miss Lisa Esterline, that India can count. The piece on the right side is just a conglomeration of different stitches. It's called Around the World in Stitches. And every box there contains a stitch that is named after a country or a city or a region. It was a lot of fun to do. I don't do a lot of counted work. This was more challenging because once I laid down the pattern on most of these, I didn't have to count anymore. The one on the left is a piece called 50 Shades of Gray and a Red. I taught that at EGA National 2018, I believe was when I taught it. I don't know that I will teach it again. I really don't enjoy counted work. as much as I do the surface stitchery. I don't have the same passion for it, but I was pleased with the way this one turned out. It was a lot of fun to do all those nice little boxes of different stitches, and we had a good time. If you're interested in it, I do have books left over that I'm willing to sell. But that was proof that yes, India can count. And click. I also weave. I'm not a gifted weaver. I have an upright Navajo loom, which is a primitive sort of loom. I prefer it to my floor loom or to any of the others, maybe because I'm a bit primitive myself. But in working with weaving on the loom, I started thinking that this is something that you can do on fabric just as easily. All of these pieces are done on something like Aida cloth, only stiffened, fairly stiff, and they're only connected at the edges. The warp threads run from top to bottom, and then I wove sideways with the weft thread. And what I'm working on right now, these are all actually embroidery. These were all done with different kinds of embroidery floss and just a plain old ordinary needle. I'm working right now on taking these pieces on the stiffened canvas and folding them into boxes. And that might be something that I do down the line. It's been a lot of fun. It's one of those things that you really can't make mistakes on unless you start out with a preconceived idea. And I tend to just start out with just a general idea of what I want. And when I start stitching, sometimes the piece that I'm working on decides it wants to be something else. It doesn't want to be. I have one piece that I did for a commission for somebody. And I was thinking that I was going to have this beautiful hillside of purple lupin growing up through the grass. And the purple lupin just would not behave. The grass would not behave. I took out the grass. It was one of those frustrating designs and frustrating projects. And I literally took the thing and I threw it across the room and I was done with it. And I walked over, I don't know if I was going to step on it or kick it to the side or what, but it was laying upside down. And I realized that the problem with my lupin growing in the field was that it wasn't lupin growing in a field at all. It was wisteria hanging down from a lattice work. So I picked it up, I turned it upside down, and it turned into wisteria. And it turned out to be one of the nicest pieces that I've done. So I've concluded when it comes to design and when it comes to embroidery, there really aren't any mistakes. You've either got padding that you can stitch over, or you've got a different picture than you started out to begin with. And one more click. And that's the end. That's the bear in my museum, by the way.
If my cursor could cooperate. Yeah, let's see if I can.
Your work is really beautiful. I'm especially impressed with the cottage and all of the stitches that you put into that. I just kept staring at that thinking, I don't know if I would have the patience to do more than about an inch.
The
Beautiful.
cottage,
The one,
The cottage with all of the different flowers and stuff. It was towards the beginning.
one?
oh, your Irish cottage.
Yeah,
There you go. That you're not sure it's Irish, but it's called that anyway.
yeah. Well, I was hoping to go to Ireland at the time. I finally made it a few years later. I'm a botanist. I'm a biologist with a background, particularly in plant science. And I look at that piece and I think, this is so wrong. These flowers would not be in
Stop. I don't know it, so it's beautiful.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun to do. It was just a matter of throwing every stitch I could think of and every kind of thread that I owned on it.
Well, in your sky, you said you used 15 different shades of gray and blue.
There were at least that many. There's a
And
lot of pink in it too, to give it
yeah,
that.
I'd have to look closer, but it's gorgeous.
It
It's
took
gorgeous.
about 2 weeks of working on that in the evenings to finally finish it. It's all of those are straight threads that are couched down in one or two places.
Wow.
So it took a long time. But
Impressive.
thank you. That's one of my favorite pieces too.
Anybody
Thank you,
else?
India. This was very, very interesting. I appreciated it so much. And you saw my empty chair. I have restless leg and I had to get up and walk around, but I was listening and looking at all of it, and it was wonderful. Thank you.
So much for coming. I appreciate it. I figured I was just going to be talking to Trudy and Lisa tonight.
Oh no. No. Anybody else have any questions for India or comments? You can unmute yourself.
This is Lucy, India. I have read your article in Threads magazine, and it jarred my memory again, and I'm going to go back and look it up and reread it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
So I was familiar with, when you started talking about the embroidery, I thought, oh, I know about this embroidery. So just know that somebody read it.
That's wonderful. You know, I found that it was very popular, especially in the 40s and the 50s and up into the 60s in Israel. And everybody had something, an apron, a shirt. They taught it in schools.
Mm.
Everybody had something. But in the 70s, it began to fall out of favor. The Yemenite Jews were really not well treated in Israel. And a lot of them ended up moving to the United States. They're much closer to the Hasidic Jews. And a lot of the Hasids in New York City helped them move to New York City. There's a congregation in Los Angeles, a couple of them down there. But it fell out of favor. And when I started looking for people that knew about it, I discovered a lot of people had these pieces. They'd gone to Israel and brought them home as souvenirs. And it was kind of an interesting thing, because the first ones that I came across were a collection that belonged to a woman whose name was Shulamit Newman. And she and her husband used to travel the world. He was a really well-known Torah scholar, and he would wander the world lecturing on very over my head kind of matters. And she was a folk singer. She wandered around singing Israeli and different folk songs, different Jewish folk songs. And her performance costumes were these Yemenite Jewish and Israeli Yemenite costumes that she had ordered from various designers in Israel. And when I was doing online research, one of her daughters had written an article about her mother. And there was a picture of her wearing a pre-1948 dress that she wore as a very young woman when she was a concert pianist. So I sent a letter or an email to Rachel, said, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. I'm interested in what your mother is wearing. And I think the next morning, I get this telephone call from a woman in California who was Rachel's sister, Rena. And she said, well, her mother had died in 67, I believe, of breast cancer as a very young woman. And she said, we still have all of Mom's performance costumes. Would you like to see them? And I applied to EGA for, I think it was the Legacy Grant, which they gave me. And that paid for me to go to California and stay in a hotel and spend, I think it took me 2 full 10-hour days to photograph this collection that Rena had. She and her sisters, she had 3 sisters. And I would not have gotten through it if Rena hadn't started ironing clothes. And she also acted as my as my model for it. And I didn't realize when I asked her to model the costumes for me, so I could see them on something other than a dressmaker's dummy. She had not worn her mother's clothing except for a costume show here or something. And it became a very emotional thing for her to put on her mother's clothing, and discovered that it fit. And it was quite an emotional experience for everyone involved. And a few years later, I saw another thing online, and this woman had some of the traditional tourist stuff that they sell in Israel. And I sent her an email and said, "This is who I am. This is what I'm doing." And she called me the next day. She was so sick, she could hardly talk. She had a terrible cold, but she was so excited that somebody knew what it was. And she said, "You know, the people that you really need to talk to are these 3 sisters that moved here from Israel." And I said, "The Newmans?" And she said, "Yes." Mind you, this woman lived in New York City. Rachel's son was living with her in New York City and going to college at the time. What are the chances in a country of 300 million people that the 2 I contact are going to know each other? And the other lady that I got hold of is a woman named Ziva Newman, no relation, spelled slightly differently. But she collects Palestinian embroidery and the Israeli embroidery and the Yemenite form of the embroidery. She's got plenty of money. She can buy whatever she wants, and she has a huge collection. And I saw her in an online interview about her clothes, and these are her regular everyday clothes. This is what she wears. And I sent her a letter saying, "This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. May I see and photograph your collection?" And a few days later, I get this telephone call from this woman with this rich Israeli alto voice. And she said, "This is Ziva Newman. Tell me about your project." So I told her about my project. And she said, "Wonderful. Come and stay with me. And I have a room where you can do the photography and a place where you can stay, and you can take as long as you like." So EGA gave me another grant, and my dog and I drove to Los Angeles. I never intended to set foot in the city of Los Angeles again. I did not know what it would take to get me back down there. Now I do. And it was an experience like I had never had before. She had dozens and dozens and dozens of dresses. I didn't dare even look at the Palestinian costumes, or I'd have been off on another tangent. I spent 5 days with her, I think. I got there, she had not only made the costumes available to me, she had arranged for a party and a fashion show in her house for me. She lived in the Los Feliz district of Los Angeles, which was where all the movie stars lived in the 1930s. And the house she lived in, Chico Marx had built back in the 30s. And folks, I'm just a little girl from Hope, Arkansas. We don't have conversations like they had in their house. Swear to goodness, one of the conversations they had, her husband walked in and she looked at him and she said, "You're going to have to call Dustin Hoffman back. He's called 3 times." We do not have conversations like that in my house. She is one of the most generous, interesting people I have ever met. She's 89 now. She was about 85 at the time I was there. And on a good day, she'd pass for 65. I mean, it was, this whole Yemenite embroidery thing has been wonderful. And I could not have done it without EGA. There's no way I could have afforded to have done those things on my own. There I am, off on a tangent again. I'll shut up.
No,
Such a fascinating tangent.
Yeah,
yes,
thanks.
How many of us can say that?
right.
EGA has been good to me. EGA has been good. Right now, Carol Renard and
It's been good to all of us. Thank you, Trudy, for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to. I've got some more lined up, so watch your emails. They'll be coming out.
Good.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
India, I'm a close friend of Shirley Kay's. And I remember when you came down and spent those couple of days with her.
do you really?
Yes. And I think that I met you for about a split second. But I can certainly appreciate what you're saying about Shirley Kay and how she views embroidery.
I adore Shirley Kay. She came up here to teach a class on color 30 years ago. And it was one of those people that it was just like running into somebody I've always known.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yep.
She's quite the person. I had a letter from her yesterday. She said that she'd been retired for several years and was content to be so. They're back up in Denver now, but my daughter lives in Fort Collins, and one of these days when the COVID stuff clears up, I will be brave and I will drive to Arvada or which one of those A towns she lives in.
Aurora.
Aurora. I knew it was something like that.
Okay.
I'll go down and see her.
Good. So,
So, India, I have all the Threads magazines, and I would love to look up your issue. Can you give me just a general idea of the year?
August of 2016, I believe.
All right, thank you.
I think it's
A
in
wonderful article.
And I was kind of pleased with that article because they hadn't done anything on embroidery. And I've noticed over the years since then, there have been a number of articles on embroidery.
Yeah, they're changing a little bit. Yeah,
And
Yeah.
what was the name of the magazine?
Threads.
Threads.
Good.
Yeah, it's a magazine devoted to higher end sewing. At one time when they sold out all their back stock, I bought every back issue that I didn't have. They also have it on CD or DVD or one of those things that you stick in your computer. And mine are all piled up in my bookcase. I like to curl up in my chair downstairs with a pile of magazines and look through them. And I just don't feel as cozy with a computer sitting on my lap.
okay. Anybody else?
Even though I have seen all of India's beautiful designs, I still enjoy seeing them every time I have a chance to be able to look at them. And no, the pictures do not do justice to any of these.
That not.
If you're ever in Casper, Lisa just opened a store here within the last couple of years called Tinker's Treasure.
It's almost a year now.
And
It's Brazilian embroidery.
yeah, she specializes.
Casper?
Yes.
If you are ever in need of supplies for Brazilian embroidery, this is the lady you get hold of.
That
If-
rayon
if
thread
you
you
go-
love.
If you go on Google and you put in Tinker's Treasures, Casper, Wyoming, I will come up.
Okay.
Very cool.
Casper's surprising what we've got here.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, we lost our needlework shop, and I had a chance to be able to get the Brazilian embroidery, and I wept for it.
very cool. Congratulations, Lisa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting year. When they say starting a business for the first year is the roughest, they're not joking. Now let's throw in a pandemic, and it even makes matters worse. But I'm pleased of what has happened in the year, and hopefully the next year will be even better.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talked out, Trudy, if nobody has any other questions. I will put in a plug for teacher certification. Right now, Carol Renard and Kim Sanders and Kay Stannis and I have been rewriting the teacher certification program so that it is teaching teachers to become certified through EGA. And I hope that will be out and available before too long. I'm also teaching individual correspondence class on design for needlework. I have 4 students right now. I'm limiting the number of students I take to 6. I might stretch it to 7. It's a very intensive course. It's 9 lessons over 18 months. Each lesson will take you a minimum of 10 hours. But it's been fun. I originally took the course from I just went blank. I'm old. Ann Harris. And when Ann retired, she gave her course to me and I took it over and then eventually just rewrote the whole thing. It was a good course for me to take. I'd been designing for a while. It helped me clarify what I wanted to do. It taught me a lot about color. And then I wrote the original course for 6 lessons and I taught it for about 10 years. In the early 2000s. I retired it, I think, in 2013. And then Carol Renard of the Silver Tongue plied me with Death by Chocolate cake. It's all her fault. It's all her fault. She taught me into putting the ICC back out there because part of the requirements for teacher certification is a class in color and design. And there wasn't one out there after I quit. So it is back out there. There are 2 or 3 more spots open if anybody is interested. It's not difficult. It's not going to stop you. You don't have to be an artist. I have the art background that I've picked up on my own. I have no art background in college. But it is intensive. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of thought. But so far, with one notable exception, the students that have come through the class have been happy with it and gone out of it with some pretty good knowledge. Like I said, as a teacher, I think if you leave one of my classes with a piece that looks like anything I produced, I've failed. And this ICC design course is one of those things to toss people further down the road to design. And that's my plug. Watch for teacher certification.
Okay.
Thank
I was
you.
excited when I saw that your course was coming back out. So congratulations on that, India.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got 4 really good students.
Cool. Anyone else?
Thank you very much for everything. I really appreciate seeing all your work.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and listening.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you
so
very much for
Thank
spending
you.
your time with us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.